Jonas Fejareso, welcome to the Mapper Forward podcast. It's so great to have you back on the podcast. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here today.
I'm happy to have you here. I'm not happy to have you I'm not happy that we're talking about this very challenging subject that's going on in Brazil. Why don't you tell everybody about the article that you recently released in Roast Magazine, and we can kick the conversation off from there?
Yeah, we have a bad situation in Brazil. We had a bad situation in Brazil. Um, some regions in Brazil, like with coffee, like Paraná State, São Paulo State, and Minas Gerais State, we produce a huge amount of the Arabicas that the world drink. They are not so far from the South Pole, so sometimes some polar masses, very cold, come and cross over some these coffee areas.
Mm-hmm.
It's a rare phenomenon. It's not very quite common, thanks God. Uh, yeah.
Except right now, everything that's uncommon
Yeah,
seems to be
sometimes.
happening with the weather, right?
Yeah, there's some kind of partners, that I seen, and this is the one.
Yeah.
Like this cold mass of air just crossed over many coffee areas two times, 15 days ago, and now about 2 days ago again. So
Wow.
15 days ago, we have like a not so massive damage, but now 2 days ago, it was awful.
Oh
I, I,
no.
I work with 10 farms, coffee farms now in 2 states as an advisor. Last time I had problem, just like mild problem, not so severe with one farm, and some more bad problems with another one. So just two. Now about seven have problems, and like four are in very bad situation. These two that I said was hit before that, they got rid again. So the coffee, it's awful. We have just branches. Almost all the leaves fall in the ground, and is just like my clients.
Mm-hmm.
But I saw pictures about like big areas in a place called Cerrado, which is one of the biggest areas that produce coffee in Brazil, and the coffee is like they were burned in fire. They are black, and
What?
yeah, like black and brown. It's really sad because the next year production for this area, it's like fully affected. Because coffee tree, the Arabica coffee tree in Brazil,
Mm-hmm.
because the kind of climate we have here, so we have a season very concentrated in a period of time about 3 months,
Okay.
uh, starting in March, and sometimes go until August in some areas, but mostly in 3 months. So coffee in Brazil or grow well or grow fruits well. So we have branches and leaves or
Mm-hmm.
fruit. So that's why we have this biennial
Season.
numbers that
Right.
people see outside of Brazil. So the coffee is it's ready for next year for a good season, because we had a low production season now in
Mm-hmm.
2021, but the coffee was full of leaves in many places, so they got burned. So now the coffee will expand all the energy to grow leaves again. So the places with the
The
buds in the
buds.
branch will sacrifice fruits and flowers
Mm-hmm.
for grow again, because
Right.
it's how the plant works. So
Yep.
the plants
Let's
need
break that
food
down for people
to
so that
support.
so that we
Yeah.
can help people understand exactly what we mean by the frost and how it affects the coffee
Yeah.
plant. Because your article did a fantastic job of helping people to explain that. And we do have a link in the show notes to the article. Really, really well written. Congratulations on that.
Thank you.
And for anyone who doesn't know Jonas's work, Jonas is a very well-known agronomist in Brazil. And he has been on this podcast before. So let's talk about what happens with frost and how it affects the trees. Go ahead.
Yeah, the trees are now very harmed. We do know for sure the numbers. I saw some numbers on the internet for some people, some traders, even some cooperatives, but it's still hard to put numbers about how much coffee we will lose for the next year, because like I said in the article, we had to wait until the weather got hotter and the rain starts, so we see if these buds will sprout again, or we have the flowers will be affected.
Right.
And everything needs more rain and more temperature to make sure. The thing is, the only thing that we already know is there's some pretty bad damage that will affect the next season. Some coffee farms, like, they lost almost all the yields for next year because of the level of the damage.
Wow.
And in the younger plants, which have 0 to 2 years old in the field, many of the trees are dead because the plant is because
it's so young.
It's so young. So when we have a old tree with a big canopy, we have like airtight protection under the trunk and the branch, so the leaves are burned, but we still have a plant alive inside. When the plant is too young, it's just it's
exposed.
Trunk. Yeah, it's all exposed to the cold air, so it starts to freezing the I'll forget the word, the plant blood, the sieve. No, the sieve. Oh man, you know, the fluid
the cherries.
No, the fluid that runs inside the plant. Sap. Yeah,
Sap.
the sap. So the sap is affected, so the plant could not move the nutrients.
Right.
So the plant starts to die from the top, and then until the root. It's take a little bit of time, but usually for like very young plant that was planted this year, 2021, the plant completely die. And as the plant are getting older, more chance of surviving.
Survival.
Yeah, but if the cold is too low, I have places that I monitored. The temperature on the ground was like -4 Celsius, which it's really crazy. It's I never saw like lower temperatures like that in coffee areas in Brazil. It's very rare, and so sometimes could kill even the roots of the tree, because coffee is not like a pine tree that have some ways to protect everything. So the coffee is exposed. The coffee could support 0 degrees Celsius, with not so bad harming if are not like for a long time.
Right.
But temperatures like minus, it's impossible.
From reading your article, what I understood from the way that the frost really starts to cause damage is that this very cold system comes in, the cold air, and it freezes the water that's inside the plant.
Yeah,
which then blackens the plant, causes the leaves to fall off, which means, there's its energy trapping system gone because photosynthesis happens through the leaves. And
exactly.
so it drops all its leaves. Now the plant has to just depend on the very minimum kind of whatever foliage is left or any photosynthesis that happens through the trunk of the tree. And so it has to work very, very hard to grow, essentially. And as you were saying, from what I understood, is that the younger the plant is, the less opportunity or the less of a chance it has to survive. And the colder the temperatures are, the deeper into the plant's root system the damage goes. Also, from your article, what I understood was that the effects of this frost, because it happened on the 1st of July the first time for
Yeah,
3 days, and then you're saying it happened again a couple of days ago,
yeah, two
even
days ago.
worse, right?
Yeah,
And so in your article, what I understood was that the 2021 harvest seems to be pretty okay
yeah,
because the cherries had already cherried.
yeah,
I don't know what the word is for that. What is,
yeah,
they've fruited? They've
yeah.
cherried. I'm sorry. Would you believe I studied evolutionary biology and genetics? So I should know the word for that. Anyway, um, the cherries had already formed, and the
Yeah,
seeds, which we end up roasting as coffee, the seeds had already, they're protected
yeah,
by the cherry. So this year should be fine. But from the first time that the frost happened in early July, we had to wait until August, September before we could determine if next year's harvest was going to be affected. And now what I'm hearing is that given we had frost a second time within a couple of weeks, is it fair to say that this will definitely affect the harvest next year?
yeah. It's why we are seeing for 3 days in a row the market, the New York market for Arabicas is going crazy. It's something that I never saw for a long time. A
Right.
huge rally to up. Because even the more skeptical people are showing there we are having a problem that it's already settled before the frost. Like we have a bad situation like
Mm-hmm.
last year with the drought that happens during after September until December that already brings some problems like uh, lower yields than we are expecting for this season. And then we have a problem of some weeks of drought during the time that the fruits start to grow and the seed starts to
Form.
being harder, yeah, form. In I think it was February of this year,
Wow.
and we have a good exportation in the last 12 months in Brazil, like 44 million bags were
Mm-hmm.
exported, and Brazil were drinking 21 million of bags of coffee. So we have 65 million bags in last year. That was what we need to support domestic market and exportation. So the forecast for this season
Mm-hmm.
now it's about I think 44 or 46 million bags. So someone or the domestic market or the
Someone has to
exportation,
lose, right?
yeah, there's no so much coffee stored even in private stocks to to fill that gap. It's like it's more than 10 millions of bags that we have to be stored for last season, but we already sell almost all the coffee that we produce last season. Now we have will be probably a shortage of coffee in the future until the next season. And the next season, we don't know if
Yield is down.
yield is down. Like if we harvest the same amount of coffee for this season, with no,
Which won't
not
happen.
like, yeah, it's, oh, we already have a problem.
Right. So
So
what you're saying is we're inheriting a problem last year.
yeah,
This year, because of the drought that happened,
yeah.
the yield wasn't up,
Hmm.
and we're going to carry on 2 years. Next year is going to inherit a low yield from previous 2 years, and we expect, because of the frosts that happened this month twice,
Hmm.
it's
Hmm.
going to be an even more serious situation in 2022, on
Hmm.
top of a pretty serious situation from the 2 years before. And this is
Yeah,
happening with the number one coffee producing country in the
yeah.
world.
It's crazy because everything is settled, and we are not sure if we have more problems. It's a year until we start to harvest the next season. So we are like in the very bad
Beginning.
situation,
Yeah.
and we have so much to happen to the future. So it's kind of worry me because I know farmers need a better prices to keep the farm going,
Mm-hmm.
but we know for history, it's there a unbalance in some part of the market, bad things happens. It's what happens because if a bag of coffee could cost twice as usual, some things happen. So farmers at first sight start to earn money, but the consequences of an unbalanced market are far worse because prices of, for example, prices of inputs are getting higher because of the dollar
The
problem.
US dollar, right?
We don't know for sure if the prices go so high in the farm, how much this will affect it, the final customer. Like, okay, coffee, it's something that most of the customers, drinkers, are willing to pay because it's something like they do for like take a bath or something. It's normal, it's part of a
It's a part of
routine.
everyday life, right?
Yeah, so people maybe start to buy a bad quality coffee or drink less coffee. Something's happened. People are not willing to pay like double price for a cup of coffee, even with all the problem that we are seeing people are having with the budget.
Mm-hmm.
So it's still a mystery. But I'm kind of very cautious with my clients. I said to them, okay, you are going to get a fair payment for your coffee for a few months, maybe a few years, but you have to make precautions in many ways in terms of protect it, not spend all the money.
Yeah.
So invest in the farm to be more prepared for the future. Make sure your next season will be well treated, because it's what happens. If the price is good, more people start to planting coffee or renew old
Trees.
areas,
Yeah, okay.
old trees with have lower yields. But now we have new varieties that could be planted. So I saw a major problem for in about 2 or 3 years,
Mm-hmm.
which we saw a lot of coffee farmers doing investment in the farm. So it's when the first season of this young plants will start to harvest. So people will start to plant coffee in next year because of these good prices. So in 3 years, probably we'll see some maybe some high volume of beans. I know coffee is something magical that People do not stop to drink coffee. Every day we saw the international market growing. People are more interested in high-end coffee, specialty coffee, direct to trade, which is good. It's a market that are expanding every year. So the opportunities are coming, but the economy, this unbalance make me kind of
Nervous.
worried about how to prepare my farmers, how the traders will see that, how the market will behave. You know, coffee is, it's, for me, it's very complicated. And I thanks to my education, I have the opportunity to study, and I speak English. I could learn international papers. I could understand what traders are talking about. But farmers do not know for sure. They don't
Right.
have this access to that information. For me, it's something that I'm sometimes I feel angry about it, because farmers are the people that need to know that, to be prepared for that.
They're our
But
lifeline.
yeah, but they do not have sometimes the quite right information, because I know they have to deal with the farm. And even I always said that when I have the opportunity, that New York market, the commodity market, is something very
Oh,
complicated.
so much.
Like I study like 3-4 years in a row to understand
Me too.
how this thing work, why the price
You,
go up
you know how
like
many
1 cent.
you
and
know how
and I
many
do not.
conversations I
It's
say to
very,
people.
very complicated.
So I have friends who trade on the futures markets, and I say to them so many times, "All right, explain that to me again, but make it for somebody even
Yeah.
dumber than you thought I was." So it's so complicated. Now, 3 or 4 years
Yeah.
later, I've kind of got my head around it a little bit. At the end of the day, like you and I just checked the price before we started the conversation. It's at
Mhm.
192. The last time we spoke, the market was at 46 cents.
Yeah. It's, it's high. It's really high, hard to deal with that. I know it's important to have a commodity market to make some kind of equilibrium, and but like we need to new refurbish it, to have new ways to bring this more close. It's,
Mm-hmm.
it's like if I have a library,
Mm-hmm.
a bookstore,
Mm-hmm.
and my product is books. But the market that I sell the books, I'm not allowed to understand how it works. So I have to put in a shelves and hope that someone go there and buy it. It's like the farmer is the one that grows coffee. So
Yep.
the international market should be easy to him, at least not to like work in the futures, but to understand well how it works. How what
Mm.
kind of coffee reaches New York? Brazilian coffee are there? How many of the coffee on the Central America or Colombia? How this could affect my farm? How I can in which way I could like work in the future market as a farmer, which should be, I think, the ones that be protected by the future. Like
Mm.
I saw the mechanism of future a very interesting way to the farmers to protect the next season. So in Brazil, we have a future market, which it's called BMF. It's the future market for coffee and for many commodities in Brazil. So
All of
farmers
them are
could go
traded on
there.
the BMF.
Yeah, they
Okay.
like sell the coffee before they harvest, so
They
they
hedge.
protect. Yeah, they
Yeah.
protect the price for the next year. So they have the way to plan how much I could spend in my farm,
Yep.
in terms that I had the final prices of a product that it should be the usual way that we produce something. I never like do a phone without know how much I will sell it. It's stupid if I do that. So it's like what the farmer are doing now. Hey, they produce coffee, but they don't know how will the price in the future. So the hedge gives some kind of protection for him to have a perspective of prices, but still far away for small farmers. It's almost unreachable. It's complicated, so much
It's so
bureaucracy.
complicated.
Yeah, so I think it's something that it's in the it need to be renewed and bring new ideas how make it
We need
work
to
better.
reform it. Something needs
Yeah,
to be reformed in it. And
yeah.
just so that people who are listening to this don't have to go and do any research, let's explain to them very basically how the futures market works in coffee. So for people who don't understand, coffee is traded on what's called a futures exchange.
Mm-hmm.
It's in New York, and we refer to it in the industry as the C market. But the brokers who trade on it don't call it the C market. That's an industry term that we have. They call it the coffee market. So, and I learned that when I was speaking to one of my friends, and she says, "Why do you keep calling it the C market? What is the C market?" And I'm like, "Oh, I think it's only our industry that calls it that." So what happens is that this price that Jonas and I looked up, 192, what that means is that today you can buy a futures contract, which is the equivalent of about one container of coffee, right? One
Yeah,
contract.
yeah. For New York is about 254 bags of
Bags.
6 kilo,
Yeah.
but in Brazil is 100 bags.
Okay. So you buy a contract and you pay a certain price for it. And this is one of those weird markets where you don't actually have to take ownership of the coffee
Mm-hmm.
that you buy the contract for. What you can do is you can sell the contract at perhaps a higher price. Now, what happens is that producers or importers do that as what's called hedging. So they'll buy a bunch of contracts when it's low and sell high so that the profit that they make from that covers any losses that they may make for the coffee that they've already got. Now, where this becomes difficult and even more fuckery gets involved in this is that you don't have to be in any way associated with the coffee industry to start gambling by way of what we call speculators.
Mm-hmm.
Speculators can come in, like what's going on right now, and they look at, oh, there's something interesting going on in the coffee market. I wonder if I can make some money. So they start buying and selling contracts, which is a form of gambling. And what they do is they start influencing the price of what's going to happen with the coffee commodity price, which has a flow-on effect to producers.
Mm-hmm.
And so there are people who play these markets to make money, similarly but different in the way that they play stock markets. So these speculators come in and they start betting on coffee, buying and selling contracts, which either drives coffee up or drives coffee down. And they'll never, ever take receipt of any coffee, ever.
Mm-hmm.
So what you've got is on one end in New York, you've got people dealing in a US dollar. And then at the producer end, you've got producers who have to deal with the very real life ramifications. Like Jonas was saying, you've got inputs, which are fertilizers and, other things that are needed on the farm to produce coffee. Inflation is out of control in Brazil, right? From what we were talking about before we got on air. You've got, sure, the price of coffee has gone really high, but the price of inputs is now really high because of what's happening with the US dollar. And inflation in general is starting to go up worldwide.
Mm-hmm.
Add to that the fact that you've got, we've been talking about this a lot on the podcast recently, the issues with logistics that are happening around the world. Are you guys experiencing issues with containers? Is it hard to get containers in Brazil?
Yeah, since the pandemic, we
Yeah.
have some problems with containers too, because of China, which are not shipping stuff worldwide. So the containers, we have a lack of containers here.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure if in the last 2 months, I heard the last time I heard the news, we had some problems with containers. I'm not sure about now
Okay.
because coffee different for soy or corn are exported in containers, not in big ships
Mm-hmm.
in high volumes.
Yep.
So it's very needed the containers to do the exportation.
So with soy and with corn, do they fill parts of the ship up like a silo?
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
and then
yeah.
they move it around that way.
Yeah, it's so much easier. So we could put tons and tons of coffee without putting in small boxes like coffee.
In Brain Pro bags.
Yeah.
There
So
was,
we
go ahead.
okay. So we could, it's a easy way. So we have this is sometimes I saw like a few weeks ago that buyers stop to buy coffee because they do not have containers to ship, even with the
Yeah,
prices are good, because they have no more
they
space to
can't go
store
anywhere.
coffee. Yeah.
Yeah. I was speaking with a client of mine, and he's a consultant in the coffee industry. And he was telling me that in Guatemala, at one of the mills near him, they have 1 million bags
Oh.
sitting there, all ready to go, but they have no containers.
Ship it. Well,
I mean, there's so many challenging things happening in the coffee
yeah.
industry right now, Jonas. And that doesn't include the weather.
Yeah,
I mean, it's so
it's
interesting.
it's very challenging. When I start work with coffee, like it's almost 10 years ago,
Uh-huh.
I saw not so many thrilling moments like I experience now, you
You thought
know?
you made a smart decision back then. You were like,
Yeah.
well, everyone drinks coffee. It's going to be
Yeah,
around
it's
forever,
easy.
right? It's easy.
Yeah,
No, no.
it's
You
not.
know, I thought the same thing when I left my corporate job 20 years ago. And I thought, look, I don't want being in the corporate world, it's draining my soul. It doesn't feel like it's any purpose. I want to go into the coffee industry and the music industry. I want to feel alive. And you know, everyone loves coffee. There'll always be work in the coffee industry. No.
Okay.
No. It is such a challenging time right now across the whole value chain, right?
Yeah, it's so much. It's in my work is something that I always. That's why I go to United States to learn English,
Mm-hmm.
to bring more of this outside of the gate farm
Yep.
to inside of the gate farm to the
Right.
farmers, because there's so much outside of the farm that the farmer need to know.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's so much stuff. Like every day I spend like 1 or 2 hours studying something related to coffee, and I always feel dumb
I
because
always feel
there's
dumb in this industry. Or listen, I'm a scientist. Coffee makes me feel dumb. Let's
yeah,
like you're a scientist. Coffee
yeah,
makes you feel dumb. Like
yeah.
it's crazy, isn't it?
Yeah, and everyone now get a have a way to get information. And like I study a lot, but I have my limitation, so I have to leave some time. And so sometimes like farmers and people put me in some corner that I don't know, because he reads something in a very specific part. So then I feel dumb
Oh,
because he asked him
Google.
something. Yeah. So I say, wait, okay, I will give me some time. So I need to study that to make sure the information that
Yeah.
you get is right, because now we have a floating of information. So I have to go to the scientific models, the scientific papers, because we have like a lot of stuff going on in the coffee industry. Like we talked before about the fermentation process that are going nuts in Brazil. A lot of people are trying that with fruits, with
We talked
yeasts.
about that before we went on air. So
Yeah,
so why don't you tell people what we were talking about?
yeah, we now in Brazil we have a lot of farmers trying something different, which is part of the world. People are trying things different to like be more suitable for the market. They're looking for that product. So people are starting to ferment coffee in a different way that used to be like in Colombia, like very natural fermented coffee. They trying to add some selected yeasts, which were selected sometimes for different purposes, like
Wine.
beer
Yep.
and wine, and how can I say that, the Brazilian typical alcoholic beverage, the cachaça.
Okay.
They take these yeasts and trying coffee, and there are universities in Brazil that are studying wild yeasts, which grow in the coffee cherry,
Okay.
and they selected the best ones to do a fermented process using the selected yeasts. And people are trying to ferment coffee with fruits, usually naturals, fresh naturals in big, how can I say that?
Fermentation
Gallons.
tanks.
Yeah, fermentation tanks. And they're trying. This is coffee. I'm not a big fan of the flavor, but I know I'm not the only customer that is in the world. So if people are liking and the product is coffee, so like then try is safe for human consumption. Yes. So many farmers are trying that to give some value. It's like a fancy stuff now in Brazil,
Is
but
it selling
it's
in Brazil?
very, yeah, but in very some places, like
Specialty?
very, yeah,
Very
very special,
specialty
like
places.
cafes, coffee shops. You not saw that in
Not
markets and
supermarkets.
grocery. Yeah, just like because we need a tank, so it's not a very stuff that coffee farm could be in a larger scale. So
Yeah.
it's
It's
always is
expensive, right?
small.
To build these tanks
Yeah,
is expensive.
yeah, the farmer have to control temperature, the fermentation process, and the coffee is interesting, but sometimes the results are not good because it's something new.
It's
We don't have all
experimental.
the scientific approach on that yet. There, like I told you, there's a university in Brazil that are using a technique that to try for 2 years now, is the second year of
Oh, wow.
results. By the way, three farmers that I work at have a partnership with this university. So we tried now, the first year, we try to ferment some coffee using selected yeasts, and we see the results in a few months. Um,
How fun.
yeah, it's interesting. Like
Yeah.
coffee is fascinating, and giving the most important thing about fermentation, sometimes give the opportunity for some farmers that do not have some unique flavors because of the location or because of the variety. So this fermentation process could give a chance to these farmers to compete in the specialty coffee market. So that's is important to we need to try first.
Yep.
Then after that we check if it's fine or not. But it's always with the new stuff in the market, people are get angry. Some people get feel like uh, they see a threat instead
It's
of
fad
opportunity.
driven. Yeah.
Yeah, it's I sometimes I feel very very mad about that, but it's something, it's running around our society now, that
Mm.
people feel angry and mad and threatening for everything.
Oh, tell me about
So
it. I hear you. You know, it's one of those things. The thing that gets me gets me quite angry about it is that we haven't addressed the underlying issues for the majority of producers around the world. You know, coffee is a complex agricultural product,
Mhm.
and we have so many things that are broken about our value chain. You know, we spoke about one of them, which is the way that coffee is bought and sold.
Mhm.
This is not something that works to compensate the producer fairly for the work that they do to create this complex agricultural product. And now what we're doing is we're going and creating, producers are trying to adapt, so especially during a pandemic, and they're trying to create these fermentation methods and these experimental coffees that perhaps will give them higher prices. And on the consuming end of the market, you've got people fighting about whether this is, we should be supporting these coffees or we shouldn't be supporting these coffees. You know, some people calling it fake coffee, other people, like, it's what we should be doing is just finding the best way that we can support producers. At the end of the day, without them, we don't have an industry.
Mhm.
It's plain and simple. Without
Yeah.
them, we don't have an industry.
Mhm.
And so if we have people getting really upset and saying, no, I'm not going to support this because it's a fake coffee, because
Mhm.
somebody put pineapple, any kind of fruit in like, really, the
Yeah.
pineapple is the thing that you're pissed off about here? You don't think
Yeah.
that the producers are pissed off that they had to spend all of the money they earned from last year's harvest to build the fucking fermentation tank to put the pineapples in, like, just so that you could
Yeah.
stop bitching about what's going on?
Yeah, it's not uranium,
It's
it's pineapple.
not uranium, it's pineapple. That's fantastic.
Yeah, it's when you told me about this fake coffee, I thought we was something that's industry made, because I know there's some
Yeah.
research in some places.
Yeah.
They're trying to develop some kind of coffee without coffee. That
Yeah,
it's
yeah. It's
it's
like the
what I
the fake meat that people are doing. They're
yeah.
doing the same thing with coffee. Yeah,
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 I
yeah,
thought
yeah.
when you talk about that,
No,
it's we were talking about this issue. It's is the problem is to bring the wrong message to the drinker. It's
right.
like for many years, I heard for people outside of Brazil, when we talk about naturals
I rem-
and washed coffee,
yeah, this is
people
the
think
same
the
thing.
natural is not washed,
Yeah.
and it's not true. It's that the process. So bring the wrong message, it's very bad, because this is stuck in the chain for a long time, and it's hard to wipe it out and explain something to the customers, like fruit fermented coffee will be much easier. So
There's the term.
it's
That's the
yeah.
term that we need to use. I've been thinking about, I recently put up an episode of the Daily Coffee Pro saying, like, this, you know, this term, fake coffee, we need to come up with a new term. Fruit fermented coffee is a fantastic term.
Yeah, it's clear, the bring you the right message, and as always said, the drinker take the decision if it they will drink the coffee or not, if they will like the coffee or not. If you call it fake coffee, the drinker will not are willing to drink the coffee, I think
Mm.
so. So it's
Well,
a
and
bad impression.
it's a bad representation
Yeah.
of agricultural societies trying to adapt to the
Yeah.
challenges that they're being faced with in real time. And then you've got people on the consuming end who are trying to represent these coffees that half understand what's going on. They don't even really understand what's going on. They heard
Hmm.
someone that was cool, that they think is cool, talk about it. And so they're just going to say, well, I agree. No, you
Yeah.
fucking don't. That's the problem. And so if we can attach I've written it down because I'm going to tell everybody to start using the term.
Okay.
You heard it here on the Map It Forward podcast from Jonas. Jonas has coined the term fruit fermented coffee. I love it.
Yeah, yeah. It's like I was many times in my life I saw some like um uh let me say it's not stupid idea but the wrong message idea. I always think
Miscommunication.
about the yeah, the brainstorm on this meeting when they got this term, and someone
Who was
in a
in the
group of
room?
people, yeah, then, oh, why not you call it fake coffee? And another one say, oh, it's a good idea. Let's
Yeah.
do not think about more about it and
Yeah.
just put it's fine. So it's like, nobody think about that, the consequences of the wrong
Mm.
message. Or did you talk about with the roasters, with the drinkers, with the farmers to find a better way to give a solution to them, to make it's very important to give like a clear message,
Yeah.
transparent, to not tell a lie for the drinker, which are the most interested in the coffee, and make it fair for everyone. It's kind of stupid that
It's very
it's
stupid.
yeah, you need to talk to more people to
Yep.
check, and so it's
The
very
issue is, though,
confused.
Jonas, that the privilege in our industry is very weighted towards the consuming end.
Mm-hmm.
And so the consuming end of the value chain also gets to influence not only the industry side of things, but the actual end consumer without giving the producer any opportunity to weigh in on that discussion.
Mm-hmm.
And when that happens, you've got the balance of power unevenly distributed across the value chain. And, that's classic coffee industry
Mm-hmm.
bullshit, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's so frustrating to see
Mm.
this farmer worldwide putting aside of the discussion. So we have no representatives. I don't
Mm-hmm.
know if it's the right word.
No, that's the right
Uh,
representation. You don't have enough
representation,
words.
yeah.
Yep.
And the chain, I know there is some issues like the language issues, but we could deal with that.
Right.
And there's so many ways. We had Google,
Yep.
so we could exchange some ideas. We have people that are very very competent in the farmer side. So like the normal democracy stuff that we already know, I think works well in my opinion. So we have to bring this really the farmers. I know we have to listen to everyone because it's important in a democracy way to know there's some farmers needs, but not everything could be granted now. We have to study and make it work in a long term, which is very important to the coffee chain, is always thinking in long term, because everything's happening long term in the farm, and it's not so fast like the coffee market that's changing crazy, almost 30% in 3 days. So
It's
in the
so
coffee
insane.
chain, in the farm is very low, the things happen. So is the price are good now, the farmer will invest now to possibly have some profit in 3 years.
So what they're investing today, they don't see a return in 3 years for
Yeah,
that, as long as everything goes well.
yeah,
Like everything
it's
has to go well for that
yeah,
return on investment to
yeah,
happen.
yeah. It's what it means for, if you are a coffee farmer, that's very risky. And sometimes I think I talk with a farmer and said, you are a crazy man because you take so much risk to growing coffee, and you are not sure if you're gonna make some money in the
Mm.
future. For me it's crazy. It's why during the decades, the farm side is getting weaker, and just a few ones are finding some way. The things are better, I know that. Like I saw you in one of your, I heard in your podcast that you
Hmm.
talk with a cup of excellence guy.
With Darren Daniels.
Yeah, the something that's happening in Brazil, that farmers are roasting coffee here and shipping for outside of
Yep.
Brazil from another states. It's fantastic.
It's
I know
awesome.
it's something that needs more support to grow better,
Hmm.
because we need to bring that opportunity to other countries, not just Brazil. It's important to give that idea and make things happen,
Mm.
because again, the buyer, the drinker, take their decision if they want to buy a coffee from Starbucks or from the farm or from the grocery. Okay, let them take the decision, but we have to give the opportunities or the conditions that the farmer could do that and compete in this market too.
And it's all about education at that point, isn't it? It's about
Yeah.
empowering them with the understanding of, listen, you can participate in a whole
Mm-hmm.
other part of the value chain. It's not just the producing up to the green and then
Mm-hmm.
that's it. If we can find a way to perhaps create a co-roasting facility, or
Mm-hmm.
find a way to get someone to roast your coffee for you and
Mm-hmm.
then give you the opportunity to sell it. Uh, there's so much technology available now that
Mm-hmm.
you can ship coffee from Brazil to Australia or
Mm-hmm.
to the United States directly from the farm,
Mm-hmm.
and it can
Mm-hmm.
be there in a week. And you
Mm-hmm.
just set up an online store so that somebody's able to do it. But again, it's down to education and access,
Mm-hmm.
right? So,
Mm-hmm.
luckily, what you've got now is like, I want to shout out to Los Pirineos in El Salvador. And God rest his soul, Gilberto Barahona. He passed last year, but the farm passed on to his children, Fabiola and Diego Barahona. Now, they're in their mid-20s. And so they've got the farm manager that's running the estate, and as the kids are learning how to produce coffee. But now what you've got, both Diego and Fabiola were studying overseas. One was studying marketing and the other one was studying business development. So this is where what you get is, and I was having a conversation with Fabiola, and she was saying to me, we've got to get things moving better with social media. We've got to start some really exciting marketing projects. We've got to start an online store. We've got to do all this stuff. And I'm like, this is so exciting for the coffee industry. You've got this injection of really smart, cool, talented next generation of coffee producers who want to take advantage of technology. And that will be great for the farms that have access to that.
Mm-hmm.
And hopefully what that means is, because it won't be great for the farms who don't have access, but
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
if what we can do is find a way to get that education happening to surrounding farms, or perhaps find a business model that leverages the access that one producer has so that they can perhaps bring coffee from around that neighborhood and then put it through the same portal. Now you've got more empowerment and you're redistributing the power across the value chain as producers start to go more direct to consumer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I saw a lot of opportunities
Mm,
now in the market because of the internet and how the social media is working. Farmer now is I saw in the last 3 years getting more into this social media thing,
mm,
because they saw that it's important to have a good coffee, but it's important to everyone know about the farm
marketing.
and, yeah, and what they are doing. And I saw the only problem about that, it's I'm worried, like always, about the farmers that do not have access
Yep.
to this technology, because we are having putting them so apart in a point that this guy is so far from this guy. So there's so much to do to reach then. All these guys get out of the coffee farming and go to the city or find another way, which is bad. So it's important to do not give condition to these farmers to work to walk in the same lane so they could go together. So we saw this problem in everywhere, not just in coffee. If we put people or ideas so apart, like we see in politicians, like we have many far right wing and left wing, because they are so apart.
So
then now
far. The
it's
center is so wide, right?
yeah, and now it's so difficult to these guys to talk, and we have these issues worldwide because of that. And it's hard to be a guy that bring everyone together. I know, because I always be that guy. I believe in small, medium, and high-end technology farms, because everyone have their spot in the market. We need everyone. But what happened, the guy in the middle always do not, how can I say,
compete.
The middle guy like try to put them together, but both hate the middle guy.
Yeah, he loses, right? I know. I'm one of those people.
Because he supports both.
Because that's the person in the middle can see everyone's side of things, right? And nobody likes somebody who's reasonable and rational. Especially if you've got people on two extremes, they want you to pick a side. We live in a society that's tribal now, right? You're either on the left or you're on the right, and which you have to pick a team.
That's why I buy my spear, because we're tribal now.
I always love my conversations with you. They're full of wisdom and funny. I mean, the thing is, over the last, let's say, decade, as we've started to see specialty coffee really start to take off, in particularly when you've got things like Cup of Excellence happening, and you've got, you know, a lot of high-end Asian consuming markets coming in and buying out a lot of the, you know, the top 10 lots, and that started to become a trend, and now you've got these very expensive coffees all over the world being bought out for hundreds of dollars a pound. What you're starting to do is you're starting to separate out producers further and further from each other, so that now there's an elitist status in the industry for these coffees that are being produced, whether you're using pineapple or not. You know, that could potentially be the next thing that scores $1,000 a pound. Who knows? But at the end of the day, the big problem that exists is that still producers are not getting paid for commodity grade coffee enough to cover the costs of producing the coffee and running the farm. And this echelon up the top is such a tiny, tiny, tiny speck of the whole problem, right? And I wonder if it feels like there's some weird imaginary clock that's running, and it's counting down. And I think when I read your article, I think it ran down a lot quicker. Because I put up a Facebook post about a week ago, and I said to people, listen, if you have a coffee that you really like, go and buy enough for the next 12 months and put it in your freezer. And I keep getting this sense that there's going to be a severe shortage of coffee, and that is going to be what starts to wake people up maybe. It's not even a certainty that that will happen, because somebody's going to be around to profit from that.
Like always.
Like always, right? And it's like, well, what is it going to take for people to understand that we've got producers that for the last couple of decades have been, mostly the last half a decade, I'd say, that are just walking away from their farms in Central America because it just doesn't make sense to produce coffee anymore. There's no profitability in it. And so, like, where do we go from here as an industry? If we've got all of that happening at the consuming end, at the producing end, and then on the consuming end, what you've got is cafes trying to just barely scrape through and survive in a pandemic. You've got massive labor shortages. You've got all these really challenging things going on with this pandemic. And at the same time, we've got climate shifting going on that's causing frosts in all different regions of the world, and flooding happening everywhere, massive heat waves, etc., etc. Like, it's really difficult right now to be all like, go team human. You know, you know what I mean? I feel like we fucked up a lot, and we're just like, now we have to bear the consequences of a lot of that. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, it's sometimes like I feel I have to put everything together and think about it, because it's a pretty mixed situation. Because I always said I saw more people willing to make the difference now than 20 years ago. Like, there are people interested in buy direct trade coffee, do more sustainable practice in their homes. So I know it's better. I'm not so have a bad feeling. Yeah, but not enough and we have not so much time. This is the problem.
Yep.
We have to grow more faster than the things are happening. So, and we still have like a bad governments that are thinking stuff that it's not really matter now. It's something that they have like sadly old minds, and people still rely many people still rely on that. So that's why we have these guys there. Right. Even in democracy, in democratic countries, we sometimes have this problem. Like I said, people always feel threatened about stuff, so they are very. Once I heard a psychologist, psychologist that said humans are very suggestive. So if some people are very smart enough to like drive these people, we have a lot of problems. This happens.
Oh, that's happening. That's Trump, mate.
Yeah.
Right? He is their king.
Yeah.
Trump is the king of all those suggestive people who are easily suggested to. Trump is their king.
Yeah,
so is Bolsonaro.
Yeah, it's because people feel like they have fear. This is the fear is something that driven not only human but animals as general. So it's when some people deal with that and understand how to work. We have like bad leaders, even in right wing or left wing. Both are not worried about getting people better. They just worry about power. And so it's something that sometimes I have to put in my mind to like do not feel depressed about, to see some future.
Tell me about it.
Yeah, so we have like, there's good stuff, and I go to the farm with the farmers.
Sit with the trees.
Yeah.
You talk to the trees and you think, okay, the world's fine.
And I still struggling for a better future, for to make reason. So I have I hope 100 years in the world, and I feel like I could make the difference, and everyone could make it if they are really willing to see more than stuff, and see more people, and everyone have needs, everyone have some reasons to do things, so you have to understand and think together and find solutions. It's very important. It's very difficult to do that. It's not easy, because if was easy, everyone are doing that now.
Well, we don't have the
And
right value structure, I think, as a human
mhm,
race. You know, there's a
mhm.
podcast I'm listening to right now that you might find interesting. Have you heard of the Jeffrey Epstein story?
Yeah, yeah, a little bit, not so much, but I heard it.
Right. So, for anyone who doesn't know, Jeffrey Epstein,
Mhm,
I'm sure everybody knows, but it's a
mhm,
big sex trafficking thing, right?
mhm,
There's a podcast that came out a couple of days ago called Chasing Ghislaine, and Ghislaine Maxwell was his girlfriend, right? It's relevant to this conversation. When you listen to this podcast, you start to understand that the focus of the rich elite is very disconnected from the average person.
mhm,
The way that they run their lives, the way that they socialize, the way that they make decisions, the way that they fight each other, the way that they love each other, the way that they connect with each other, it's very, very different focused than the way
mhm,
the average person operates their life.
mhm,
While you have that disconnection, nothing gets fixed.
mhm,
Nothing
mhm,
heals. These are
mhm,
people who when they have a problem, they go and find the most expensive lawyer in the world and just tell them to fix it. And if that lawyer and your lawyer don't like each other, they just start suing each other again and again and again and again and again.
mhm, mhm,
And then you keep listening to this podcast 11 episodes in, and what you find out is that lawyers that were involved on Ghislaine's or against Ghislaine and against Jeffrey Epstein worked very, very hard to make sure that this story was all over the press. They talk openly about it. That the lawyers worked very hard with PR agencies to make sure that this story was flooded all over the world. And it makes you sick.
mhm,
It, I listened to that right after I had read your article.
mhm,
And it sickened me because we have a situation in Brazil that is going to affect so many producers for years. Not just producers, their families,
mhm,
their employees, all of
mhm,
this kind of stuff.
mhm,
And then I listened to this podcast that was excuse me, the person who was doing the podcast happens to be a close personal friend of Ghislaine Maxwell. She's a reporter, and she's a journalist who happens to be very wealthy and who used to socialize with Ghislaine and Jeffrey Epstein. And she's telling this story from that perspective, and she was talking about how they used to socialize with Prince Andrew, and they used to do this, and they used to, all these benefits and balls and all this kind of stuff. And yet producers are struggling to get $2 a kilo for $2 a pound for their coffee. Excuse me. The disconnect between us normal people and the ruling class
mhm,
is so distant
mhm.
that I fear that our value structure as a race has gone out the window.
Mm-hmm. Totally agree.
I don't know what happens next, because it feels,
Mm-hmm.
and I've been saying this a lot on the podcast, on my other podcast, Love and Other Delusions. What I feel has happened the last year and a half, all of the issues we've kicked down the road is ended. And now
Mm-hmm.
we have to deal with the consequences of all the things we've been kicking down the road.
Mm-hmm.
And now it's time to pay the piper. And I don't know what that means, but what I can see is that a lot of people are starting to have to deal with the shit that they have tried to delay dealing with.
Mm-hmm.
That may be on a corporate level, that could be on a climate change level, that could be on a personal level. But we as an industry are starting to have to pay. If you just look at what's going on with the on the consuming end, baristas have been complaining for decades about their pay rates.
Mm-hmm.
Now what's happening is the pandemic happens, governments start saying to baristas in the US and here in Australia, they've been saying, we'll give you government assistance. Now in the US, the government unemployment was twice and sometimes 3 times a barista's wage. So then when people say, no, we're opening everything back up again, come back to work, I don't want your job anymore.
Mm-hmm.
I know what it's like to live on better money,
Mm-hmm.
and you can stick your job, I'm not coming back.
Mm-hmm.
That's an example of we
Mm-hmm.
didn't listen to each other.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so now you've got a massive labor shortage on the consuming end. That's only going to get worse. And because of that labor shortage, McDonald's stopped opening for dinner.
Really?
McDonald's and Chipotle started closing at 7 p.m.
Whoa.
because they couldn't get staff. In the US, Taco
It's
Bell was
crazy.
closing at 7 p.m. This is real consequences for these companies.
Mm-hmm.
If
Mm-hmm.
McDonald's can't open for dinner, not that I haven't had McDonald's in like over 10 years, and so I'm not upset by that. Stop eating McDonald's, people. It's not good for you. But you know what I'm saying, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it like you said, it's completely right. Like what I read, it's the government assistance is so much better than they use it average salary, and people don't want to go back
No.
to their bad wage money. They want, fair payment. I know I read once, was, I think was, what name of him, my gosh, I forget. James Hoffman.
Yeah.
I think few years ago, he was talking about the price of espresso in a coffee shop, and most of the money of the coffee shop go to the landlord, to the
Goes to
rent.
rent.
Yeah, the price of the coffee is like peanuts.
Nothing.
Doesn't matter the price of the beans. So it's something that we have to think about it. So why this price for a place in is so expensive? So let's find a way that we could bring, because the landlord, if there's no employee to work, there's no company that will rent the place. So it's kind of the stupid thing that we do not understand. But there's a ways to fix that, like pay better price for the coffee, let's find an equilibrium like always. And everyone could find a solution that works for everyone. Or I know it's not everyone will be filthy rich, but everyone have the opportunity to earn some money.
Yeah, it will be a more even distribution. Like it's
Mm-hmm.
people, we're not talking about communism here. That's not what we're talking about.
Yeah, I'm not talking about that.
You
Okay.
know, most people are sitting there going,
Yeah.
bloody
Yeah.
communists. We're not being communists here, I promise you.
Yeah.
What we're saying is just a fairer distribution of what's
It's just
going on.
that.
That's it.
Exactly. Yeah, I really hate the idea of, everything for me that put limits for something like, I know something that we have to have some law, but you can't sell something, or you just have to earn this amount of money,
Yeah.
or you just have to have one car, or you just have to have one business. This is really bad. I don't
Freedom
believe
is
in
important.
nothing.
I'm
But
a
we have
big
to
fan.
put it like some laws that bring that freedom, some equilibrium, some
Yep.
balance. It's very important to keep going, because if the market's totally free, it was crazy,
It's
right?
corrupt. It
Yeah,
opens it up for corruption.
everything, because humans have no good
Values?
distinction of, they don't know certain limitations in terms of when we are talking about money, because and power. So that's why we have some kind of social structure to make this many people business like stick together and create a society. But sometimes we have to renew that to make our free society more fair for everyone. So we have like baristas with earning a fair price without any government saying, oh, you have to pay at least $4,000 for a barista, because I know that doesn't work
It doesn't
in
work.
long term. Yeah,
No,
it's
no,
just
no.
crash it. So it's more a think about values and restructure than impose some things, So the easy way is said to, okay, pay $4,000 for your barista and everyone was happy, but it never works.
It never works. And there's so many underlying problems that I have started to realize in the few years that we've been talking to producers on this podcast. A lot of what's happening for cafe owners is being mirrored at the producing end. And what I mean by that is you've got, when I speak to business owners, I do a lot of consulting work. And when I speak to people who are on the consuming end, who are small business owners, they say to me, Lee, I want to be able to pay my staff more. But I operate this business on 2% net profit, or I operate this business on 5% net profit. That 5% I'm putting in the bank in case we have a bad year next year. Or what happens if something breaks and we have a major repair that has to happen. And they say to me, I don't understand how people think I'm supposed to just find all this money to pay all this extra stuff, right? Same thing's happening on the producing end. And when I speak to producers and I speak to cafe owners, the one thing that I have come to understand is there's a fundamental miscalculation happening of people not understanding how much knowledge is really required to run a small business. People not understanding how to manage cash flow. People not understanding how to read income statements or how to read a balance sheet. People not understanding how to negotiate leases. People not really understanding all the hidden costs of doing business. And so what you'll typically get is somebody looking at the market and saying, well, everybody's opening a cafe. Surely it must be profitable if so many people are opening cafes, right? And then they get into it and they think, oh, I must be doing something wrong because I'm not making any money. And then they'll come and speak to me and I'm like, no, nobody's making that much money. You just got sucked into the bullshit.
Of disappearance.
Yeah, you thought that I'm just going to leave my corporate job and I'm going to go open a cafe. And it must be profitable because everybody's doing it. And I make really nice muffins. So I'm going to make muffins, and my husband makes really good coffee. So he can be on the coffee machine and I'll be making muffins with my pretty little apron on, and he's going to have his cool fedora, and everything's going to be fine, and we're going to socialize all day. And
Yeah.
100% of the time, Jonas, they come back and say to me, I hate my life.
And you have free coffee every day.
My friends are going to come in and we're just going to sit around and have coffee all
Yeah.
day while my baristas are going to make and like, yeah, your baristas are going to make next to nothing. Your baristas are going to make minimum wage, and the only time they're really going to be able to eat is when they're working, because that's what they can afford, when they can afford to eat, when you're paying for their food. This is a broken system.
Yeah. Yeah, it's the same in the farm. Like
Exactly.
farmers are the owner of the land, but they need a lot of people to work with him. Even a small farm, they need more people. The farmer could not rely on family work, because they need, in Brazil at least, during the harvest season, we need more people to pick the cherries, because all the season is concentrated, like in the month that I said, in 3 months. So farmers need to hire people to work there, and sometimes the pickers complain about the price, but farmers are dealing with sometimes 0% of profit.
Negative.
Yeah, they really know, many of them really know they need to pay better prices for the pickers, but they have no rely on prices. Maybe now, because we have some good prices, the things are changing, but we still having the same problem in the US. Not many people. I know that from Colombia too. About 1 year ago, I heard agronomists talking about, we have less people willing to go back to the fields to work in the farm, because the wage are not so good. Second, because it's a really tough work to work under the sun. So there's no roof over the coffee trees. There are no bathrooms everywhere. Like if you work in an industry, you don't have free coffee every time. Just if you bring with in your thermos, they have sometimes risks involved, because a coffee field is nature, so we have spiders, we have snakes. So it's a risk. It's kind of a very risk job with no good paying price. So I experienced in the last 3 years a very shortage of pickers in some regions, like the regions that I live in, São Paulo state. The cities nearby, it's really hard to find people here, because São Paulo it's one of the states with the best development in Brazil, because it's a very industrialized state with a lot of companies here. So the quality of life, it's better than the average in many regions of Brazil. So people in this area are not so willing to work in coffee. So
because of other opportunities?
Yeah, there are many opportunities. Used to be many opportunities before pandemic, at least.
Yeah.
So
I laugh because I would cry otherwise. It's very hard across the value chain, right?
Yeah, there's no people, and every year less. So farmers, people from another states, like Bahia and the north of the Minas Gerais states, which sadly are more poor states in some areas. They come to this area, like let me say, more than 1,000 kilometers migration and buses, and then they harvest the coffee, stay in this area or other areas in Brazil, and then go back to their
Hometown.
cities. Yeah, after staying here about 3 months. So now
Wow.
the farmers in Brazil that work with the hand labor, they totally rely on these people from the northeast of Brazil, and they are very how can I say, they work very hard because it's the time that they make money to sometimes a year. I talk with pickers that I always like to be in the fields during the harvest season because I think it's important to be with the people to understand what's happens. I really got interested in people histories. I think every history is fantastic.
Yes.
So I love to talk with people for different areas, different countries, or different states to understand stuff. And so they work 3 months to make money for a year in their area because of the poverty there. The money that they make here is a lot of money there.
Okay.
And we are thinking the same country, not like they are coming for some other country with problems, but we still have huge differences
Yeah.
in Brazil, and people here are not willing to work for this salary, but there they are willing to work because the money worth in their city is a lot of money. So every year there this huge migration. And by the way, I wrote an article when we have the pandemic started,
Yeah.
because I'm worried about if these people will could come across the state's border to harvest coffee, because we have like border states closing
Yeah.
some places. And last year it was hard. The pickers just came to Brazil, to the coffee areas late than expected, but they came. This year it runs, thanks to it runs okay. People came, but we
Okay.
are always relying in this problem because, like I said to you, we're just you said, how can I say, you pushing down the road? I forget the
Kicking the can
expression.
down the road.
Yeah. So it's a problem. Why people are moving like
Yeah.
more than 1,000 kilometers to came
To
here?
work.
Yeah, to work. There's something wrong there.
That's wrong. Yeah.
So
Oh, yeah. Oh,
yeah.
yeah.
So, but as still we have in a flow of anything, people are not too worried because it's happened. Let me see what's happened if when we have the problem. So let me think about it before.
Once it breaks,
Yeah.
then they'll try and fix it.
Yeah.
But
It's
until
what's
it breaks,
happens.
exactly. This
It's
is the
okay.
way the world works, right?
Yeah.
This is where I say I think that
Yeah.
the road's coming to an end. This
Yeah.
can that we keep kicking and kicking and kicking.
Yeah. Mhm.
When it comes to coffee producing countries like Brazil, like when you start to see a serious drop in yield of coffee,
Mhm.
what do we like? What does that scenario present the value chain with?
Yeah. An interesting thing about people that are outside of the coffee farm market. Sometimes they think always there is a easy way to fix stuff, but it's not. That it's what happens when we have the forecasts about the frost that hit Brazil. Some people around the world, which are not from the coffee farm chain, said to me, why you not take precautions if we have the information? Because there is no
So
easy
easy.
precautions to take. Just because of that, because I know there is some precautions, because I know something about coffee because I'm an agronomist.
Yeah.
So it's what I do. And I said, very gentle, of course.
Good man.
There's no precautions in some situations.
Yeah.
There's some precautions that is impossible, like take a blanket and put over each coffee tree. Maybe it's quite expensive, and there is a blanket shortage probably in a few days. So there are no
Oh, that's
easy precautions.
fantastic. A blanket shortage.
New York Times new blanket
Yeah,
shortage
that's
in
going to be the
Brazil.
headline.
Yeah. Uh,
Coffee industry causes blanket shortage around the world.
now everything is possible.
Oh,
So
fuck yes.
yeah.
Did you ever think that oil prices would go into the negative? Never.
Yeah, it's crazy.
So a
So
blanket shortage doesn't sound like it's
yeah, like
ridiculous. No,
normal
no,
stuff.
totally.
Okay.
Yes. It is absolutely plausible these days that the coffee industry
Yeah.
would cause a blanket shortage around the world. You heard it here first, folks. Prediction for the future.
Yeah.
Oh man.
So there is no easy solutions like
No.
people think there. So I saw when I have some as an agronomist with I deal with about 10 farmers
Mm-hmm.
with are responsible for. So I study climate because it is a issue that I have to deal and
Mm-hmm.
find solutions sometimes if there's any. So I saw the froster coming
Uh-huh.
because we have good mathematical data, climatic data
Mm-hmm.
that's every year is more precise.
Right.
So I knew it there something happens, but the
Not enough
first time
blankets.
I'm not sure. Yeah,
You couldn't buy
yeah,
enough blankets this time.
to cover everything up.
No.
So the first time I'm not, I thought was not so hard there. It was. So the precautions are kind of mild. I just take
Okay.
some few precautions and was kind of mild. So we have not so many problems. The second time I saw the mass polar cold weather coming, and we take all the precautions that was studied in coffee along years because Brazil have a lot of frosts
Mm-hmm.
history. This is I think the seventh, no, the 27th time that we have a frost in Brazil. About four are very severe. The last one was in 1994.
4, right? So there
Yeah,
was 1902, 1918,
yeah,
1975, and 1994. This is from your
exactly.
article.
Yeah. The last data
Severest.
severest that we had. So I take a week to study all the papers
Oh,
before
wow.
the frost are coming to understand better what I could do, because
What
it's
could
not
you do?
something. Yeah, there's some techniques that could be used
Okay.
in some situation, like doing the we call the fog technique.
Mm-hmm.
So we have like big barrels
Mm-hmm.
with wooden chips, a
Ah.
kind of salt and oil. So we mix everything up, burn and suppress the flames, and we have this fog that like make like an
Ah.
artificial fog in the area. So it makes like a cushion of hot air, and then it's hard
Wow.
to the cold air to move and flow around the area, but works until certain temperatures. Like
Please tell
if
me you have
very,
photos.
yeah, I have photos.
Will you send me some?
Yeah, I will send you. So
I love this shit.
yeah, I do this with all my farmers
Uh-huh.
that I in precaution. So we do all the mix in the right proportions, put the barrels in the places that I think is where the cold air will come.
Mm-hmm.
So I do everything, but temperatures below zero, it's not enough to use. It's until 0 degrees, this
It
technique
works.
works well. But underneath that, it's so much cold. It's
Yeah.
like to
It becomes
melt.
frozen, right? You're
Yeah, yeah,
freezing the soil.
it's too much cold, so it's lower the damage. So if they do not do that, maybe we lost the tree.
Oh, wow.
But it's still a lot of damage in the leaves because the amount of cold air is so much. Another technique is to use water spraying. The spray in the area, like um, make like a cushion of high humidity,
Mm-hmm.
that's it's harder to the low temperature like flow to down to up. And
Ah,
then we have like stop the freezing level, so the water just freeze, the maximum temperature of water freezing 0 degrees.
yeah,
So if we're always spraying water, I know there is still 0 degrees, and the coffee leaves could survive
yeah,
until minus 1.5 Celsius degrees,
yeah.
because inside the coffee leaf there is no just water, there water and some salts like magnesium, calcium, and sap
Nutrients, minerals.
that's
Yeah,
lower the
wow.
temperature of freezing of the leaf. So if I keep 0 degrees, maybe the leaves and the plant will survive. But I saw in some nurseries that they are using techniques, the young plants
Mm.
looks like a popsicle. It's freezing.
It's
It's
frozen?
like, yeah, it's like a young tree but inside ice,
Oh
because
my
the temperature
God.
is so low that even the water spraying start to freezing there. Even with the flow inside the pipes, it's what was not enough. And finally, the last technique,
Mm-hmm.
which could be used for young trees, very young trees, we covered all up with dirt from the soil, because it's like a blanket, you
Uh-huh.
know.
Yeah, yeah.
And but all the techniques that I said to you could be used in a small scale, and
Right.
big scales is hard to
Mm.
like the fog technique. You have to make sure and study where to put the barrels to understand how the fog will work in the terrain and where the cold air will flow inside the area. So it's hard to like
Wow.
burn a thousand barrels.
Yeah.
And so
And
in small
expensive,
scale works
I'm
out.
sure.
Exactly. It's very expensive. The water technique, the producer have to be a irrigation system to work to do that. So they will not put everything up in just 2 or 3
No.
days. And the cover technique sometimes could be used in large scales, because there are some tractors with some kind of
Equipment?
implement,
Yeah.
equipment that could cover put soil
Ah,
over
right.
the, so make it more in more scale.
Yeah.
uh, and but after the frost, the farmer need to take the dirt out,
Mm.
which it's not a machine that could do, so he needs to do it
Labor
by
intensive.
hand. Yeah, so there's techniques, but not always the solution could be used. It's what happens. Many farmers use the techniques like mine, but the cold is so low that even with that, we lost leaves. It's why its weather is complicated.
Mm.
I always said, man, I it's the nature engineer. It's what the agronomists do is very hard to deal, because there's so many variables in in the that I have to deal with,
Yeah.
and many of them do not follow the rules that I were expecting to work. Like if I have a machine, I understand how this machine works.
Mm-hmm.
I know how to fix it. Many problems because I understand the variables. Beyond that, like if I have a pipe that overheats, it's because of that. So, but nature is not work like that.
Too many
There,
variables in nature, right? Especially
yeah,
now as it's changing so much. The weather
yes, it's
patterns are changing so much, and I have one question for you that since I read your article, I've been dying to ask you this question. When it comes to agronomy and you talk about all the different things that you have to do as an agronomist to make a farm a success, the microbiome in the soil is one very important part of that. Now, when something like this happens and you've got these freezing temperatures, all the leaves fall off the tree, they go into the soil. Two questions. When you get this kind of frozen situation, what effect does this temperature have on the microbes in the soil? And is the fact that the leaves are falling off these trees, does it have any kind of regenerative properties for the soil long term?
Mm-hmm. The question with the microbiomes and the soil, they are more resistant to low temperatures than high temperatures.
Okay.
It's like we do in labs when we freeze some microbes to keep it then for future studies. So probably I know there's some more sensitive biology in the soil because we have like animals like worms and some kind of bugs that eat degrade the organic matter.
Yep.
So they could be not so resistant as microbes.
Yep.
But I think they will deal well with the low temperature.
Okay.
In terms of leaf falling in the nature, everything is regenerative. So if in the last season I put some nitrogen in the soil, it could be like soluble fertilizer source or organic source, both have nitrogen. So the roots suck it in and we have leaves. So when this go down, degrades and go back to the coffee tree, like in the forest.
Yep.
The problem is the forest have all the time to do that. The farmers do not have, because the investment that he did last year or this year is to harvest coffee next year, not 3 years after that, because he needs the money now.
Yep.
So the nutrients are not lost because all the organic matter will go back to the soil, and the new trees or the trees that will be pruned, because probably that trees will be pruned after if in September we saw no good sprouts.
Yep.
We will prune the trees to give the opportunity to have a better
to give the plant a better chance to survive.
Yeah, it's better than do not cut all the branches. So the branches will go to the ground and the nutrients will do this go back to the again to the tree. So it's fine. I think in terms of soil quality we will not have bigger issues. Just the problems will be in terms of crop yields.
So how we've taken up a lot of your time, and I really appreciate this. Has been a really fantastic conversation. So do we do we still need to wait till August, September before we understand the extent of the damage?
Yeah, some we I could not say about numbers yet, but we could have some research on field. I go to the field in a few farmers that I work with to check, because it's easy to see how far
The
the
damage?
cold wind go inside the plant.
Right.
So I take a branch, the branch that bear fruits,
Mm-hmm.
and with a knife I was cutting each node. I think
Yep.
node.
Each node. Yeah.
Yeah, each node, to check if there sap, green sap inside the node. So I was cutting from the tip until the trunk,
Yep.
and check how far the cold winds go into
Ah.
the tree. So I could know in advance how much prune I will use in August and September, and maybe then I could have a close number, what a kind of percentage of loss I have in my farms. But
Right.
probably the national agents, which call CONABI,
Mm-hmm.
which do all the forecasts in Brazil. It's a government agency. Now have some technicians in many regions checking that I said to you, to evaluate all the situation. So 4 times a year, usually they release a report
Okay.
about the coffee situation in Brazil. And I think it's the most reliable source
Mm-hmm.
if you are a trader or something that are interested in coffee, because there are many reports everywhere. But I really believe in that report because they use like a very clear protocol, a very clear
Mm-hmm.
approach that I, as an agronomist, could understand what a method they
Ah.
use to do the forecasting. So probably now they are running around in coffee region, collecting data, bringing back to the headquarters, and probably in a few months they will release this reporting talking about projections, forecasts, and damage level for 2022.
I'm gonna ask, um, when you know what you think the results are, will you contact me and let me know?
Okay, I will.
Great. And we're going to air this podcast on both Map It Forward and on my other podcast, Love and Other Delusions, because the big challenge of this is that this is something that the general public need to know about,
Mm-hmm.
not just the coffee industry. And
Mm-hmm.
so the other podcast is for the general public, or if you're listening to this on the Love and Other Delusions podcast, then it's this podcast. But we don't have enough ways for our industry
Mm-hmm.
to communicate what's happening to the general public. So I
Mm-hmm.
thank you so much for making making the information so easily accessible, and thanks for the work that you continue to do with your writing and with being so generous, so generous in communicating to the English speaking part of the industry about what's happening in Brazil. I really appreciate all the work that you're doing.
Thank you so much. I always happy to share some of the knowledge that I have,
Mm-hmm.
and I really believe in the sharing idea of
Yeah.
everything, and to build a better chain, a better world. And I talk like hell, so it's easy to me
You
to.
talk like heaven, my friend. I've enjoyed this conversation so much, just because it's one. I understood, I hope, a lot of the things that you were talking about, but it's just so very interesting to get to understand a part of your world, because on this end of the value chain and the consuming end, we can be rather disconnected from what
Mm-hmm.
happens with producers. So you're like the connector with all of that.
Mm-hmm.
So I really appreciate the time and effort that you go to to try and communicate that to the other end of the value chain on our side.
Mhm.
So thank you for your
Mhm.
time, and thank you for all that you're doing for the coffee supply chain. Our industry is better because you're in it, Jonas.
Thank you so
You're
much. Thanks so
welcome.
much. Everyone that are hearing that podcast, feel free to reach me out if you have further questions. I love to talk with people, and as much as I can, I answer all people that reach me on LinkedIn, Instagram, and Twitter to bring more clarity, more transparency, and how the real stuff happens without any crazy how can I say that, alarmist, no, it's
Alarmism.
yeah, I bring like it, this is what happened, you take your own opinion about it.
Yeah. Yeah. And we will have links in the show notes to the
Cool.
article, and we will have links to connect with you on social media.
Cool.
Okay. Thanks again, Jonas. I really appreciate your time. Peace, love, and peanut butter, everybody. Have an amazing rest of your day.